What's going on, everyone? Welcome to the Tuesday, whatever today is, Tuesday, July 29th edition of the Ship My Money Show. I'm your host, Adam Scherer. You can follow me on Twitter at ShipMyMoney DFS. Don't think we got the intro little clip, and it threw me off at the start, but 12 gamer, and that's pretty much what we've been getting every day, it seems like, for the last week. Going to go through game by game, as usual, using the Run the Sims projections. Take a look at how I would be attacking the large field $18 tournament on DraftKings if the slate started right now. More importantly, going to talk every aspect of all these games, talk ownership, talk projections, all of that, talk the different matchups, how you can exploit them if it's a spot that you want to get to. As a reminder, you can use the Run the Sims projections that you see on the screen. Use promo code UTAMLB and get 10% off. The link is in the description below. Two projection package options for you. $100 a month gets you the full projections package. Everything you see on the screen, fully detailed projections out of our in-house sims. They're good for prop betting. If you have a prop betting model, you can, for DFS, upload them into whatever optimizer or sims product that you use. If you don't need the full projections package, you can also just get the MLB Draft Caddy option. That's $10 a month. Overlays the DraftKings projection directly onto your screen. Link for either of those is in the description below. Don't forget to use the promo code UTAMLB. Also, exciting announcement from us. Our NFL packages are live. I will talk about those a little bit more later on. I want to get into this one since we do have 12 games, but keep an eye out for that. I will talk about those partway through the show. Our NFL packages are live. Promo code EARLYBIRD gets you 15% off of those. Again, I will talk about them more in a little bit, but starting things off here with the Yankees and the Rays. Max Fried pitching for New York. For Tampa Bay, we have Joe Boyle making the start. Not much interest in Boyle here. He's getting about 3.5% ownership. I'm getting to him in like 1% of my lineups. I think that he's a solid pitcher. The issue for him throughout his career has been whether or not he can limit walks, and we have seen him improve that at times. He does have good stuff, does have good strikeout stuff, but he still is pitching in Yankee Stadium against a very potent Yankees lineup, albeit no Aaron Judge. Still a good lineup here. 6,500 is a cheap price tag for him, so he does have that working in his favor as well. There is upside. If this were a shorter slate, I think I'd probably be a bit more interested. Also, some questions about exactly how deep into the game he's going to go. He did only throw 39 pitches in his most recent outing on July 23rd, threw 26 pitches in 2 innings on the 18th. You go back to July 11th, he threw 60 pitches. You go back to the 6th, he threw 95 pitches. So he's not that far removed from throwing a lot of pitches and working deep into a game. We have him projected to face 17 to 18 batters here. We have him projected to go around 4 innings. I think he certainly could go a little bit deeper, but I don't feel overly confident that he does, given that, one, we don't know exactly what kind of limitation Tampa Bay will have on him, and two, you do also have to factor in that he's facing the Yankees in Yankee Stadium. That is just a matchup that generally is going to lead to pitchers going a little bit less deep into games than maybe they're allowed to, given that the Yankees are really good. It just increases the chances of them pitching poorly. But I would certainly say Boyle is somebody that if you are just looking and you're like, man, I really want to click on this guy, he at least has the talent to give you a good game. You probably have to run a little lucky on the leash that Tampa Bay gives him. And then obviously you need to have him have a good performance against a Yankees team that has a high total here. But there is talent there for Boyle. On the other side, Max Fried, $10,000, getting 13% ownership. I'm not getting to too much of him here. I only have about 3%. We don't have him projected that high compared to at least one other projection source that maybe is driving up ownership a little bit. And that's kind of just where I'm normally at with Fried, where we're normally at with Fried. If he goes out there and has a great start today, it certainly wouldn't be the first time that he's burned me. But I generally just have trouble, especially on larger slates, paying $10,000 for pitchers that aren't great strikeout pitchers. It is a decent strikeout spot for Fried, but it is also a dangerous matchup. There are plenty of quality power bats in the Yankees lineup. It's hot up and down the East Coast today, as people are mentioning in chat. I assume that applies to New York as well. I know it's miserable here in Baltimore. Was going to walk. I needed to pick up a prescription at Safeway this morning. It's like a mile and a half away or something. And I was like, oh, I'll walk over there. It's like 10:30. It's probably not too bad out. And I walked maybe half a mile and was just like, screw this, I'll do it tomorrow, first thing in the morning. It's absolutely miserable here. I think it's pretty much that way across are up and down the East Coast. So, there is risk here in Fried, and you're paying a premium for a pitcher that is good at limiting runs, is good at getting outs, but only has a 22.5% strikeout percentage coming into this game. Does have, again, a very good 3.45 xFIP. His stuff plus grade is at 111 this year, which is well above average. It's well up from last year as well. I certainly wouldn't fault anyone for going to Fried. He's a very good pitcher, but it's not the spot that I'm likely to get to today. There are some other arms that I like a bit more. Offensively, starting on the Tampa Bay side, I'm not getting to too much of them either. I thought maybe I would be since I don't have much Fried, but it is a 12-game slate. There are plenty of other offenses. And then again, Fried is $10,000, and that's probably a pretty big reason why I'm not getting to too much of him. This would be a little bit different of a spot if like Fried were 8,500 and I weren't playing him. Then that margin for, well, how does Fried not have a good game and Tampa Bay not have a good game? Like, how does that happen? When Fried's 10K, Fried can have a good game and still not be a particularly useful option. So that kind of is what it seems like I'm rooting for with the way my lineups look right now. The only player on Tampa Bay that I have much of at all is Yandy Diaz at 4,600. I have him in 5% of my lineups. He's projected for 3% ownership. He's the only guy on Tampa Bay getting more than like 1% ownership right now. He is our highest projected bat on the Rays. If you're going to Tampa, Junior Caminero, obviously really good as well. Those would be the first two guys I think that I would want to get to. But Diaz really the only one that I have right now. For the Yankees going up against Boyle, I don't have too much of them either. This one is kind of a little more concerning to me, but you do have the potential pitch count concerns with Boyle. But like Boyle's a good strikeout pitcher at $6,500. It's kind of a little bit more difficult to see like, well, how does this work out where I don't want the Yankees and I don't want the $6,500 relatively high strikeout guy? But when you factor in that, the Yankees are relatively expensive. $5,400 for Jazz, $4K for Rice, $4K for Grisham, $4,200 for Stanton. They're not super expensive, but they're not the cheapest stack. And then there is, the possibility that Boyle just gives you 5 innings and he's good, but he's not great. There is still that middle ground, on a 12-game slate where I don't think you have to have one side or the other. The field is getting to the Yankees more than Tampa Bay, and so am I. 8% projected ownership coming into Jazz, 7% to Rice, 4 to 5% to most of the rest of the lineup. I'm getting to 5% Ben Rice. He still has catcher eligibility, which is really nice. I'm getting to 3% Jazz, 3% Grisham, 3% Stanton and McMahon. So I'm a little under the field here. I still have a little bit of Tampa, or of New York, rather. It goes without saying, they're a high upside offense in Yankee Stadium. I certainly wouldn't tell anyone not to play them, just like I wouldn't tell anyone not to play Max Fried, but it doesn't look like the path that I'm taking right now. And that is the nice thing about 12-game slates. You can find plenty of different ways to go. Going back to last season, 138 expected ISO allowed to lefties for Boyle, sub 100 to righties, 28% K percentage to righties, 22.5% to lefties. So again, he's been good. He has very, very good stuff. It's just a matter of can he locate it or not. As far as Max Fried goes, so far this season, 204 expected ISO to lefties, but also has a 29% K percentage, only a 121 expected ISO to righties, also only a 20.5% K percentage against right-handed hitters. We don't have lineups in this game yet, at least as of, or for Tampa Bay at least, but you are probably going to get a predominantly right-handed lineup. For the Yankees, we did get their lineup. Pretty much looks, I think, how you would expect with no Judge. Grisham, Rice, Goldie, Bellinger, Jazz, Dominguez, McMahon, Volpe, and Wells. Looks like the lineup that I had when I ran everything. So overall, not a game that I'm getting too much of. I would say that if you were going to pick a side, like it would be the Yankees side first. Fried is the pitcher I would be most interested in here. And then the Yankees bats are the ones I would want to get to first. But it looks like I'm just personally prioritizing some other things right now. Next, we have the Dodgers taking on the Reds, and this will get to one of the things that I am prioritizing. Tyler Glasnow is going for the Dodgers. Nick Lodolo is going for the Reds. Went heavy on a young, talented Reds pitcher yesterday against the Dodgers. It worked out really well. I don't plan on going back to the well on this one. I'm going to go ahead and quit messing with the Dodgers while I'm ahead, I think. Lodolo is getting 3% ownership at 8,300. He's in 1% of my lineups. He is somebody that does have underlying talent. We have seen a drop off in strikeout percentage so far this year, down a couple points from last year. Stuff plus is still slightly above average, but down a little bit from last year. And obviously just a very difficult matchup against the Dodgers. They are struggling a bit overall of late. Will Smith has been hitting really well, but he's been out of the lineup for the last couple of games. But overall, they have been struggling, but it's still a very talented lineup, very difficult lineup to face. And you're not really getting a price discount on Lodolo. You're in Great American Ballpark. So I'm not really interested in him. I am very interested in Tyler Glasnow on the other side at 9,200. And that's not any sort of an island. I have him projected for 39 to 40% ownership. He's in about 55% of my lineups. He is inexpensive at 9,200 for the overall skill set that you get with Tyler Glasnow. Historically, a very, very good strikeout pitcher. Now, his numbers this year are a little bit weird, and I think it's useful to look into them a little bit. He's only thrown 36 innings so far this season, missed a large chunk of the season on the injured list. He still has a 31.7% strikeout percentage. That's pretty close to where he was last year when he was at 32%. His average fastball velocity still coming in at 96.2 miles an hour. That is pretty close to last year. He was at 96.6. What really stands out is that his stuff plus grade is down to 96.5 from 107.5 last year. His location plus grade is down to 91.4 from 100.4. So you have this big drop off in overall stuff plus. You have this big drop off in command, but you have to keep in mind that there's a large rust factor here for Tyler Glasnow because of dealing with injuries. And, he didn't pitch at all between the end of April and the beginning of July 9th. So you would expect, the expectation, I think, for Glasnow, especially because we haven't seen a drop off for fastball velo or even strikeout percentage so far, I think the expectation should be that sooner rather than later, Glasnow just gets back to being Tyler Glasnow. And if you look at his starts individually and look at the stuff plus and the location plus in those starts, I think it paints that picture as well. In his most recent start, he had a 102 stuff plus grade. That was his first start with above average stuff since his first start of the season. He also had a 105 location plus grade. That's his first start of the year where he's been above average in both of those stats. And his location now has been above average in 2 of the 3 starts since coming back from the injured list. 105 last start, 111 the start before that. So you have seen the location, the command trending in the right direction. The stuff has gone, it was 98, 97 in the first 2 starts back, and then 102. The fastball stuff plus grade in particular has been above average in all 3 of his starts since coming back from the injured list. So I do think you see Glasnow going in the right direction. He also threw 106 pitches, I believe it was, his last time out. He faced 25 batters, so we don't have any workload issues there. I think overall, especially factoring in that Glasnow is also coming in at $9,200, he looks very good. Devin Scott mentioned strikeout splits for Glasnow. Historically, he's fine against both sides of the plate. So far this season, in that limited sample, he has only struck out 20% of lefties compared to 45% of righties, but he's only thrown 275 pitches total to lefties. If you go back to last season, 30% strikeout percentage to lefties, 34% to righties, still better against righties as you would expect, but very, very good against both sides of the plate. This is a Reds lineup that if he just can't locate, if he's not on top of his game, they certainly can do damage. McClain, De La Cruz, Hayes, Fraley in the middle of that order are all solid hitters. But you don't have TJ Friedl in this lineup. Gavin Lux leading off, that's a benefit, not having to face Friedl. So it's not the best Cincinnati lineup. There's also no Tyler Stevenson. You have Jose Trevino in there instead. I like Tyler Glasnow, all things considered, a lot here. He's my highest owned player. He's my highest owned pitcher right now. And I'm perfectly fine with that, especially at 9,200. Beyond the rabbit hole said, I think Lodolo throws a solid game. Certainly could. I mean, hitting's really difficult. The problem is that he's 8,300, and there's just on a 12-game slate, there's going to be so many pitchers in that price range. Plenty of them are probably going to throw solid games. You're generally going to be able to find either cheaper pitchers or guys in that range that project better, or in a lot of lineups, you're just going to have cheap enough bats that you can get a more expensive pitcher. I mean, Glasnow, for example, is only $900 more expensive than Lodolo. We have him projected, 4.5, almost 5 points higher. So I do think Lodolo is a solid pitcher. It's obviously just not a great matchup, not a great park, and you're going to find, I think, plenty of other options to get to. Glasnow is a priority for me, though. Moving over to the bats, starting with the Dodgers. I am getting to them. So is the field. 10 to 12% projected ownership coming into all of Will Smith, Mookie Betts, Shohei Ohtani, Tommy Edman. 8% coming into Hernandez, around 5 to 6% to Pages, to Freeman, to Rojas. I'm getting to 18% Will Smith. We do not have a Dodgers lineup yet. He may or may not be in it. But if he is in it, I do like him at 4,500. He is one of the better hitting catchers in baseball. Obviously, Cal Raleigh at this point is just sort of in his own category there. But outside of Cal Raleigh, Smith is one of the best hitting catchers in baseball. Lodolo has allowed a 189 expected ISO to right-handed hitters this year. Will Smith, only 88 plate appearances against lefties this season, but he does have a 287 expected ISO. He has an expected WOBA above 400. If you go back to last year, 291 expected ISO against lefties, 383 expected WOBA. Really like getting to Will Smith here if he is in the lineup. You have a $4,200, a cheap Mookie Betts. He's in 15% of my lineups. He has a 360 expected WOBA, 168 expected ISO against lefties since last season. Again, you're just getting him at a very cheap price. Shohei Ohtani, I have about 13% at 6,500. Yes, it's lefty-lefty. He still has a 383 expected WOBA and a 263 expected ISO against left-handed pitching since last year. Lodolo has held lefties to a 140 expected ISO this year. But again, that is all lefties that he's faced. Most lefties don't hit left-handed pitching well at all. Shohei Ohtani does. I can pretty much guarantee that Nick Lodolo would have an expected ISO above 140 if the only lefties that he faced all year were Shohei Ohtani. Tommy Edman in 10% of my lineups, along with Teoscar, 6% Pages, 4% Freeman. So I'm pretty close to the field on most of these Dodgers bats. I am a little bit over on Will Smith and on Mookie. I just really like the pricing that you get on those guys. It's a great park for offense. Although keep in mind, Dodger Stadium is actually the best home run park. But Great American is great for power. It's still great for scoring runs. And I just really like the pricing on those two guys in particular. For the Reds, I'm not getting to them. TJ Friedl was in the projected lineup that I used, and he was in 1% of my lineups, which was the high mark. He's not even in the lineup. Historically, Tyler Glasnow, not good at holding runners. So if you wanted to play that angle, Ellie De La Cruz, if he reaches base, is probably just going to walk the second and then walk the third. Our stolen base projection on him is extremely high. It's high on Matt McClain. It was high on TJ Friedl, but again, he's not in the lineup. It's high on Noelvi Marte. So that would be like, if you're making an argument for the Reds, it's one, Tyler Glasnow is going to be popular and you're getting negative correlation against him. And then two, at least the Reds are a team that has speed against a pitcher that isn't good at holding runners, but it's a 12-game slate. There's going to be a lot of really good spots. It's not one that I'm likely to target, but those would be the arguments I make in favor of the Reds if I were going to go that route. Cam the Man said, I know you mentioned not knowing the leash on Boyle. Do you think he's more likely to go 5 innings because Bradley isn't there? Usually Tampa Bay tells us if they're doing an opener, don't see anything. I don't think he's an opener. Like, I think he's an actual starter. But it's, what does that mean? Like, because he's been so limited in his most recent appearances, hasn't even reached 60 pitches in 2.5, 3 weeks. I think they would probably like him to go 5. My expectation is like, if Joe Boyle goes 5 innings and like 72 pitches or something, Tampa Bay is probably happy and they probably don't run him out there for a 6th. I'd be surprised if you got more than 5 innings from Boyle. Obviously you can get less because he can just pitch like shit. He can be really inefficient, whatever. There's a lot of things that can go wrong. I think our projection of 4 innings right around 12 outs is reasonable. If you wanted to argue maybe 13 and a half outs, I think that would also be reasonable. But pitchers like that are always kind of tough for me to want to get to as well, because normally when you think about like the distribution of fantasy points for a pitcher, even if it's a bad pitcher, they still have some sort of a ceiling because they can go out there and just miraculously pitch well. And if they pitch well, they'll give you 7 innings. Like if they're efficient, just getting outs, they'll give you 7 innings. They'll just, if they're cheap, they'll get their own points. Somebody like Boyle, I don't know what the right tail of that distribution actually looks like. On the one hand, yeah, he could just go rack up strikeouts. He is capable of that. And maybe you get 8 strikeouts in 5 innings and you're certainly very happy. But I think there's a very good chance, and I'm not saying 100%, but I think there's a very good chance that if Joe Boyle is just having like a normal good game where, he's striking out maybe one guy per inning and he's throwing 15 pitches per inning, give or take, that Tampa Bay just says, cool, we got 5 innings out of you. You're at 70 pitches, you're at 75 pitches, whatever. You're done. That's more than we were hoping for. And we're on to the next one. And then maybe next start, Joe Boyle goes 90 pitches. That's kind of my concern is I think it's likely that Tampa Bay is just like happy with 5 innings if he gives it to him. Maybe he goes more. Like, again, I could be wrong, but I don't think, to kind of get to your question, I don't think he's an opener. Like, he's in the starting rotation, but I also don't think he's stretched out necessarily to just go throw 85 or 90 pitches, considering that he hasn't even thrown 60 since the beginning of the month. So that's more so my concern on him. Boston taking on Minnesota in Minnesota, about a 4.5 total for the Twins, 4.5 to 5 for the Red Sox. For where the hell's the game? For Boston, we have Lucas Giolito. For Minnesota, we have question mark. We didn't have anybody in our. Oh, so we have Pearson Ole, who I don't think is in the player pool. Need to pull up his minor league stats, because I'm not going to lie, I know absolutely nothing about him. 6'1", 25 years old, not a prospect. Looks like he has very good command. AAA this year, 7 games, 3 starts, 2 starts, 13 total games at AA. Doesn't project to be anything special. Most projection models have him with like a 16 to 17% strikeout percentage, 4.5 FIP, give or take. For Giolito, he's getting 12% ownership here at 7,800. I have 10%. It's an okay spot. It's an okay pitcher. I think the price tag looks fine. I think the matchup is okay. Giolito striking out 21% of the hitters that he has faced so far this season. Minnesota's active roster against right-handed pitching, they rank 18th in strikeout percentage. They rank 21st in WRC+. It's just kind of a middle-of-the-road spot. You may or may not have Byron Buxton here. Obviously, his status matters. But just getting to a little bit of Giolito, not a true priority, but sub 8K, decent spot. Have him in 10% of my lineups. For the bats here, I am getting to the Red Sox a bit, and so is the field. 6% projected ownership to Story, 7% to Duran, 7% to Bregman, around 5%, 4 to 5% to most of the rest of the Red Sox. I have 13% Story. I have 11% Duran, 10% Bregman, 9% Anthony. So I'm around 2x the field on most of these Red Sox bats. Again, that doesn't mean massive exposure to them because there are a ton of offenses, but I am getting around 2x the field going against a pitcher making his major league debut that doesn't project to be anything special at the major league level. He doesn't project to be horrible either, but I do like getting to some of these Red Sox bats here. I think that they are reasonably priced. 3,800 on Story, 4,600 on Duran, 4,800 on Bregman is the most expensive hitter on the Red Sox. So I do like getting to them a bit. I think they're one of my highest owned stacks, which makes sense. It's not necessarily a spot that I want to go out of my way to target individual hitters. Like, I think you're going to be able to find individual batters that are just you prefer to most of these Red Sox, but you do kind of get that added volatility when you get a guy making his major league debut, not knowing what he's going to look like in his first major league start. And obviously, if he just goes out there and shits the bed, you would want all the Red Sox you can get. So it is a team, like, it makes sense to me that they're one of my highest owned stacks, but I don't have a ton of Red Sox exposure in general. It's not like I have, 30% Story and I'm stacking the Red Sox, and then I'm playing Story a bunch as a one-off. I think most of my Red Sox exposure is in some version of a stack, which does make sense against a pitcher that projects to be okay, but that certainly has a lot of volatility, even more volatility than usual going into this matchup. For the Twins on the other side against Giolito, not a bad spot for them. Giolito is certainly not the pitcher that he used to be. 218 expected ISO allowed to righties this year, 265 to lefties. Strikeout percentage against lefties is better than against righties, 24.5% to lefties, only 18.5% to righties, but he's giving up power to both sides. The Twins remain inexpensive for the most part. Cody Clemens, 3,100, first base and second base eligible, getting 5% ownership. I have about 13% of him. good value play, has enough upside to justify that price tag so far this season. 282 expected ISO and 170 plate appearances against righties. He's hit the ball really well so far this year. 241 expected ISO going back to last season. That's a lot of power upside for somebody that's 3,100, probably hitting in the middle of the order. Royce Lewis getting 6% ownership. I'm even with the field there. Talked about him the other day, but his expected numbers are outpacing his actual numbers so far this season. He's somebody we know has a lot of underlying talent, and he's cheap. So I am getting to a bit of him right around the field at 3,200, 5% Buxton if he's in the lineup, 5% Correa. So not a ton of Minnesota, but the guy that I am getting to the most is Cody Clemens. I do like that. Again, just a lot of power upside, multi-position eligibility, including second base, which is generally a pretty weak position, going up against a pitcher in Giolito that does give up a lot of power. Braves are taking on Kansas City in Kansas City after being the stack that you needed last night, which was unfortunate for me because of pretty much all the popular stacks. They were the ones that I think I had the least of. I was on like every popular team that didn't do well. And then the Braves just went out there and went nuts against Rich Hill and company. Today, Seth Lugo going for Kansas City. Newly acquired Eric Fetty going for the Braves. $6K price tag for Fetty. No real interest there. Very, very difficult strikeout matchup in Kansas City. Brutal park for getting strikeouts, and Fetty's not a good strikeout pitcher anyway. For Lugo, I'm not getting to him either. 3% projected ownership to Lugo. That's a pretty expensive price tag at 8,700. I know the Braves haven't been good overall this year, but they do still have quality hitters in their lineup. Lugo's not a great strikeout pitcher. Comes in with a 22% strikeout percentage. This game is in Kansas City, which again, not good for getting strikeouts. And he's just somebody that I've said it 100 times this year, but not only is he somebody that is normally a little overpriced just for his ability to limit runs, but he's probably even running hot in that category so far this year also. 2.95 ERA is going to drive up that DraftKings price tag, but he's got a 406 xFIP. It's not even like, he's Max Fried pitching to like a sub 3.5 xFIP and not striking guys out. He's pitching to like a slightly above average xFIP and striking out 22% of hitters. I don't really have much interest in Lugo here. There is some K upside potentially. Like, there are strikeouts in the Braves lineup. They're 9th in strikeout percentage against right-handed pitching this year. But again, that's not really Lugo's game. I would throw him into like the Nick Lodolo category, where if you're looking at this and you're just like, I don't know, man, I think the Braves just suck. I think they're checked out. I want to play Lugo. Like, I'm not going to talk you off of it, but he's somebody that I generally don't play much of anyway. Very similar to just like a cheaper Max Fried, I think, in the way that I generally approach him. He has certainly burned me in the past. Like, anytime that Seth Lugo pitches well, you can assume that I'm not happy. But if that happens tonight, so be it. It doesn't look like a spot where I really want to get to him, and I'm certainly not going to talk anyone onto him. Looking at the bats here, starting on the Atlanta side, not much ownership coming in here. Obviously, it is a high upside lineup, but it's not a great park for hitting home runs. It is a good park for scoring runs, but the matchup against Lugo isn't great. Again, not a great strikeout pitcher, not a great pitcher overall, I don't think, even at limiting runs, but he's not a terrible pitcher. 24.5% strikeout percentage against righties this year, 166 expected ISO. Lefties have done damage against him. Only a 20% strikeout percentage, 254 expected ISO for left-handed hitters. I would be more interested from a matchup standpoint in left-handed bats here, which the Braves do have. You have Albies, you have Harris, obviously Matt Olson, you have Drake Baldwin. There is some left-handed upside. Profar is a pinch hitter. There is some left-handed upside here against Lugo that can, you can look to exploit what has been a big weakness for him so far this season. Again, this isn't the best park for hitting home runs, so you do have that working against Atlanta. But Lugo does have a very obvious weakness this year, and the Braves do have the ability to exploit that. On top of that, Kansas City has 2 left-handed relievers in their bullpen. One of them, Sam Long, threw 30 pitches yesterday. That doesn't guarantee that he's not available today. I generally think of around 30 pitches as kind of like the cutoff for if a relief pitcher is going to be available the next day. Wouldn't be shocking if they go to him, but certainly wouldn't be surprising if they avoid using him as well. And if they were to avoid using him, then you're down to Angel Zerpa as the only left-handed reliever. So you would maintain the platoon advantage for these left-handed bats if especially if Long's not available. Also, in the case of Albies and Profar, they are switch hitters as well, so they obviously will just maintain that advantage anyway. 5% projected ownership coming into Austin Riley and to Ronald Acuna. Those are the high marks. I have 10% Austin Riley. I have 4% Acuna, 4% Olsen, 5% Albies, 4% Profar, and Baldwin. So I'm mostly around the field on Atlanta. I am 2x on Austin Riley. Now, obviously, he is not one of the hitters that fits that left-handed matchup that I was just talking about, but he is only $4,000. And for what Austin Riley gives you, I think that is certainly still appealing. Lugo has given up some expected power to righties still, 162 expected ISO compared to 119 actual. Austin Riley this year, 171 actual ISO, which is fine. 228 expected ISO. He's somebody that, throughout his career has put up big time power numbers, and he's been seemingly a bit unlucky so far this year. 230 expected ISO against righties going back to last year, and he's only $4,000. So Riley, even though he is not one of the lefties, is the guy I'm actually getting the most of here. Albies is cheap. Harris is cheap. Obviously, neither of those guys are living up to expectations so far this year for Atlanta, but they are cheap as a result, and they do at least have underlying talent. You also do get stolen base upside from them to some extent. Matt Olson, I would love to get to in this matchup. Like, I love the matchup Olsen against Lugo, given what Lugo has struggled with this year. But Olsen is 5,300. He is a first baseman, so you get a relatively high opportunity cost at that position. You get a relatively high actual cost. But if I had to just single out one hitter, price agnostic, position agnostic that I want, it would be Matt Olson, given the favorable matchup. Kansas City on the other side, more favorable matchup for them going up against Fedde. You have 13% ownership coming into a $5,500 Bobby Witt. You have 10% ownership coming into a $3,200 Jonathan India. Then it drops off a little bit, 8% to Garcia, 5 to 6% to Perez, to Pasquantino, and then drops off a little bit more to whatever garbage Kansas City has through the rest of the lineup. I'm pretty close to the field here. I have 13% Witt. I have 7% India, 9% Garcia, 4% Perez, 5% Pasquantino. The matchup against Fedde is fine. He's not a particularly good pitcher. So far this season, 237 expected ISO allowed to lefties, 175 to righties, around a 14% strikeout percentage to both sides of the plate. So it is a pretty nice matchup. Kansas City is, I think, pretty fairly priced. You did have Salvador Perez, I believe, leave yesterday's game early. If he's not in the lineup, that does weaken it a bit. He gives you catcher and first base eligibility. He has massive power upside. And if he's not in the lineup, it's not like anybody's replacing him that is remotely as good of a hitter. But Witt obviously gives you stolen base upside, gives you big time power upside. Garcia is kind of like a poor man's version where he still gives you some stolen base upside and some power upside, albeit clearly not as much. Pasquantino, first base, 3,900, I think looks pretty good here. Like I said, Fedde's giving up a lot of power to lefties. Pasquantino certainly has it. So I'm pretty much around the field on KC, but I think they look like, they're in a good spot. If this game were in a more favorable park for hitting home runs, I would certainly like them quite a bit more. Cubs taking on Milwaukee in Milwaukee, around a 4.5 total for both of these teams. Quinn Priester pitching for the Brewers. Colin Ray going for the Brewers. Don't think we have any significant wind issues or bumps in this game. Looks pretty straight up. I'm not getting to either pitcher. The field's not really either. 6% ownership to $8,500 Priester, 1% to Colin Ray. Again, I don't have either one. Priester has been pretty solid this year, but the matchup against the Cubs is a tough one. You're not getting a price discount. Comes into the game with a 23% strikeout percentage. His stuff plus grade as a starter this year is 7 points higher than last year at 97. So you have seen just an uptick in strikeout percentage, an uptick in the way his stuff grades out. His command has been close to league average. He's been pretty solid this year. But again, the Cubs are one of the better offenses in baseball. They ranked 25th in strikeout percentage against right-handed pitching. They are currently tied for first with the Yankees and the Dodgers in WRC+. Just not a spot that I'm really looking to get to Priester. For the bats, I don't have much of or any of the Cubs either. 3% projected ownership to Kyle Tucker is the high mark, followed by 2% Seiya Suzuki. I have one lineup out of 150 with Kyle Tucker. I have one with Seiya Suzuki, and that's it. Normal caveats apply here. The Cubs are always one of the highest upside offenses because they have power hitters throughout their lineup, and they have stolen base threats throughout their lineup, but they're also one of the most expensive stacks as a result. It's very difficult to get stacks of the Cubs without sacrificing elsewhere in your lineup. And that really stands out when you have a lot of offenses on the slate, and DraftKings is generally pricing teams pretty cheap outside of the Cubs. So it kind of just stands out there where if you do go to the Cubs, you really need, it's not like, oh, I need the Cubs to have a pretty good game. You either need like a Cubs blow up game, or you need it to happen to be a slate where whatever like value bats you are forced onto because of the Cubs happen to hit 2 home runs or something like that. You can obviously get there that way, or whatever value pitcher scores 30 points. Like maybe you get lucky and whatever you get pushed onto value wise ends up just going nuts. But generally, it just, the pricing makes it tough to want to really get to the Cubs too much. Milwaukee on the other side, I am getting a little bit more of them. You have sub 5% or less ownership coming in across the board on Milwaukee. Christian Yelich is at 5%. Chourio, Contreras, Vaughn, Turang, all at 3 to 4%. Andrew Vaughn's my highest owned guy right now. I have 10 to 11% of him. I've been playing a lot of him since he got to Milwaukee. He's just still really, really cheap at 2,800. And it's very difficult to quantify what to expect from Andrew Vaughn going forward. But at the very least, I think you should expect him to be better than he was this season on the White Sox. Because one, he had a 43 WRC plus. He really can't be worse. And two, I mentioned this when Ryan McMahon got traded to the Yankees. I have no idea how to quantify. I mentioned it with Robert yesterday too. I have no idea how to quantify like the drop off that you can see in hitters when they're playing on these absolute bottom of the barrel, never competitive teams like the White Sox and the Rockies, but they are humans. And I'm not saying they're going out there and actively not caring, although in some cases they probably are. But I'm not even saying that. I'm just saying from a focus standpoint, from a frustration standpoint, like anybody that's played any level of competitive sports, like going back to high school, you've been on teams where everybody is kind of just looking out for themselves and you're not really that good and you don't care really how the team does. And you've been on teams where everybody's actively engaged and you do really care how the team does. You're a competitive team, you're winning games, and generally you just play better on the latter team. I know that was the case for me, and it wasn't like an active decision thing. It was just like on teams where we were competitive and I was more invested, I played better. And I think that's normal for most people. So like, I would expect somebody like Andrew Vaughn to just not only be better because he can't be worse, but this is somebody that, maybe he hasn't lived up to expectations throughout his career since they took him 3rd overall as one of the best, college hitters ever. But up until this season, he'd still been a league average major league hitter. He had one season, he had a 113 WRC plus. I think his worst was 97 prior to this year. So it's not like, this is a hitter that was actively bad and then now he's just been like historically bad. This was a hitter that was fine and then now he's been like historically bad. So like I would expect him to just be at least average going forward and have, decent power like he always has. And he's $2,800. So I'm going to continue just playing some Andrew Vaughn. He gives you home run upside here. And then there's obviously the chance that Milwaukee just unlocks something, because that's something you get too with the White Sox, organizations like the White Sox and like the Rockies. Not only are they just year after year not competitive and bad, part of the reason for that is that they are just 20 years behind in terms of player development, especially the Rockies. But, I think there's obviously reason to think that with the White Sox as well. Like nobody goes to the White Sox or comes up with the White Sox and like exceeds expectations. Guys come up and then just die. So there is obviously some chance that the Brewers are just watching Andrew Vaughn film and they're just like, man, can't wait to get this guy and turn him into, a really good hitter. Spent time in the minors. Aggressive Goose read an article that he went down in the minors and put more velo on his swing. Yeah, I haven't looked at his swing speed, but perfectly reasonable. That's something that tends to get overlooked also. Like Kobe Mayo, a perfect example with Baltimore right now. Orioles fans were like losing their mind because I think he only started like 3 games through the first like 3 weeks of July or something. And then now he's playing pretty much every day. And it's come out that he made adjustments in his swing. So most likely they were just basically not playing him while they're working on retooling his swing at the major league level. And then now he's in the lineup with a completely different swing, different stance, and hitting really well. You never know what these teams are working on behind closed doors. You don't really know what teams are doing in the minors. But somebody like Andrew Vaughn, the expectation, all of that aside, should be that he's average-ish. And then there is some chance that like the Brewers just made him better than the White Sox did because they're a real major league organization. People go to the Brewers and actually improve and get better, and they contend year in and year out, despite being, they're kind of like the opposite of the White Sox in some ways. Like, not that you ever look at the White Sox roster, at least recently, and expect them to compete, but when they did have all these good young players, they underperformed by a massive amount. Whereas the Brewers are a team that, like, year in and year out, you look at the roster and you're just like, yeah, the Brewers, they'll be fine. And then they're really competitive. Like, they're a good organization. So very long-winded way of saying I'll continue to play a bunch of Andrew Vaughn here until this salary increases. Colin Ray so far this season against right-handed hitters, 153 expected ISO. Most of the power has come from lefties, 232 expected ISO. That would obviously point you toward Christian Yelich primarily as far as left-handed power goes. He's in 3% of my lineups along with Turang, Isaac Collins. I have 7% William Contreras. That's about 2x the field. High upside catcher, gives you some stolen base upside, gives you some power upside. He's only 3,900. So again, you don't get the platoon advantage against Ray, but it's still a good hitter. Also, I just realized I'm an idiot and this game's not in Chicago. So, of course, there's no wind issue because the game is in Milwaukee, which is just a good place for hitting home runs in general. I had read it backwards originally. But anyway, yeah, I'm not getting to too much of this game offensively. But what I am getting to, 10% Vaughn puts me around like 2x the field. 7% Contreras, around 2x the field, and then I'm pretty much even with the field elsewhere. Mike said, are the O's going to trade Mullins or Laureano? Almost definitely going to trade Mullins. He's a free agent at the end of the year. He's not somebody I would expect them to make a qualifying offer to, so he's just in his walk year. I would think that they just trade him for whatever they can get. I don't think they'll trade Laureano unless they're overwhelmed. Laureano has a cheap team option next year and has been exceptionally good this year. So, like, the argument for trading him would be, to sell high. Like, teams will probably offer a pretty good amount because they can keep him next year at a reasonable price. He's been a well above average player this year, but that's also really useful for the Orioles next year. So I think they need to be overwhelmed for Laureano. I think they'll just send Mullins to whatever gives them the best offer, which probably won't be too much. I can't really think of any reason that Mullins wouldn't move unless, like, he really doesn't want to, and they just like do him a favor. But like, that's obviously pretty bad, like, baseball to just like say, oh, well, you don't want us to trade you, fine. So yeah, hard to see how Mullins doesn't move, but Laureano, I think they would have to get overwhelmed. Philadelphia taking on the White Sox in Chicago, 3.5 to 4 total for the White Sox, 5 to 5.5 for the Phillies. White Sox did a pretty good job of ruining my night yesterday as they got to Christopher Sanchez. Today we have Ranger Suarez going for the Phillies, or sorry, Jesus Luzardo going for the Phillies. Get those two mixed up in my head all the time. For the White Sox, we have Jonathan Cannon. 21% projected ownership coming in to Jesus Luzardo. 1% coming into Cannon at 6,200. Luzardo is 9,500. I am getting to Luzardo here. We are a little bit higher, I think, than some other places in the industry on Luzardo, which I'm perfectly fine with. I have 30%. Again, he's getting 21% ownership. So I'm a little north of the field. Nothing too crazy. I just think, he looks pretty good overall. 27.7% strikeout percentage is second highest on this slate behind Glasnow. He has been pretty unlucky in terms of his ERA. 4.58 ERA compared to a 3.26 xFIP. Pretty big gap there. Stuff plus grade is about average this year, but we've seen a huge jump for him in his command. 108.5 location plus grade this season compared to 97.7 last season. Fastball velo also up to 96.5 miles an hour from 95 miles an hour last year. As a result, strikeout percentage has gone from 21% last year to that 27.7% mark this year. Then you get the matchup here with the White Sox, who, yeah, they have shown some signs of life lately. They've been a pain in the ass more than once, last night included, but their active roster still has the 5th highest strikeout percentage against left-handed pitching since the start of last season. They still rank 22nd in WRC+. So I do like getting to Luzardo here. The White Sox will probably have a right-handed heavy lineup against him. Actually, we have it. There are two lefties. Kyle Teal and Colton Montgomery are the only lefties in this lineup. So far this season, Luzardo has been much better against lefties, as you would expect, but he's still been good against righties. 24% strikeout percentage against righties, 152 expected ISO, 341 expected WOBA, 41% strikeout percentage with a sub 100 expected ISO against lefties. So basically unhittable against lefties and striking out over over 1/3 of them, pushing half of the lefties he's faced. Unfortunately, only 2 in the lineup, but still a good pitcher against righties. And this is a collection of mostly below average righties as well. So I am happy to get to Luzardo. I'm not getting to any Cannon against Philly. I am getting some Philly bats against Cannon. 10% projected ownership to Harper, 8% to Real Muto and Schwarber, 6% to Turner, 5% to Marsh, Kemp, Castellanos, less than that to everybody else. Kyle Schwarber, my highest owned guy here, $6,200 price tag. I have 21%. Obviously, happy to be getting to whatever Kyle Schwarber I can get to. One of the best power bats, highest upside, home run hitters in baseball. Jonathan Cannon, 173 expected ISO to lefties this year, 206 to righties. Does have a higher K percentage against lefties as well. But again, I don't care. It's Kyle Schwarber. If the only lefties he faced were Kyle Schwarber, he would not have better numbers against lefties than righties. Would I maybe prefer that Kyle Schwarber be a clone of himself, but right-handed? Sure. But I'll take my chances with Kyle Schwarber here against Cannon. Similarly, Bryce Harper, happy to get to him as well. $5,400 price tag. I have 11%. So that's pretty much in line with the field. 9% Real Muto for me. 7% Kemp. 5% apiece on Turner, Castellanos, Marsh. So mostly even on the Phillies here against Cannon, but I am quite a bit over the field on Kyle Schwarber in particular. On the other side for the White Sox, a little north of the field, but not getting to much of them. It's mostly just that nobody is playing them. 3% projected ownership to Chase Mydroth, 2.5% to Vargas, 2% or less to everyone else. I have 7% Mydroth, 6% Vargas, 5% Robert, 3% or less of everyone else. So again, very low exposures to the White Sox for me, just a little bit higher than the field in general. As I mentioned, Luzardo has been human against righties, still good, but human. Mydroth is okay. Vargas and Robert do have legitimate power. There is some stolen base upside here potentially as well, but obviously not a team that I'm particularly excited to get to. They are cheap value if you need it. They do give you some negative correlation as well. Miami taking on St. Louis. In St. Louis, Sonny Gray pitching for the Cardinals. Sandy Alcantara going for the Marlins. Both of these guys have seen drop-offs this year from where they've been in the past. For Alcantara, that has meant being a not very good pitcher. For Gray, it has meant being good, just not as good. 27.2% K percentage for Gray, down from 30% last year. Still good. Still, a good pitcher, good matchup here against Miami. Not a great strikeout matchup. They are a tough team to strike out, but they are not a particularly good offense overall, especially if you don't have Kyle Stowers. Remains to be seen if he's in the lineup, but he was scratched yesterday with an illness. If he's out, obviously this lineup is, you do lose a high strikeout guy, but you lose the best hitter in the lineup as well. Overall, against right-handed pitching this season, Miami is 14th in WRC+. They are 23rd in strikeout percentage, but Gray does have one of the higher strikeout percentages on the slate. He's getting about 13% ownership. I have 11% at 9,700. Alcantara is getting 4% ownership at 7,500. I have 1%. Don't really like the matchup for him here. Against right-handed pitching this season, St. Louis ranks 27th in strikeout percentage. They rank 9th in WRC+. I always feel like there's a little bit of a misconception in like how productive St. Louis has been overall as an offense this year versus like what people think of them. They don't have the most power in their lineup. Like they only have a 150 ISO against right-handed pitching, but they have actually been a productive offense. They've been tough to strike out. So I'm not really interested in Alcantara here, and neither is the field. So far this season, only about a 17% strikeout percentage. Now, the stuff has been good. 106.4 stuff plus grade, still averaging 97.5 miles an hour on his fastball. His command has been average. I don't really know why he hasn't been getting more strikeouts. Maybe it's a rust thing and you'll see it start to pick up. But at the same time, he's thrown 104 innings now, and that's a lot. You would have expected, most things to kind of even out by now. Jake said Luzardo was tipping his pitches in the stretch. I assume if you know that, he at this point has been made aware of that and fixed it, hopefully. So yeah, not really interested in Alcantara here. Don't really know why he hasn't been better, but he hasn't. Could just be a function of he pitches for the Marlins and he'll go somewhere else and figure it out at the deadline. I don't know. For the Cards bats here, another just sort of or starting with the Miami bats rather, not much interest there. 2% ownership coming into Agustin Ramirez. I have 2%. I have 3% Jesus Sanchez. Those are my highest owned guys here against Gray. Again, he's not as good as he was in the past, but he is still solid, striking out about 28% of lefties, 25% of righties, has given up a bit more power to righties. 184 expected ISO, 214 actual ISO, 2 right-handed hitters, 152 expected ISO to lefties. Again, Agustin Ramirez does have a lot of power from the right side, but wouldn't call him anything close to a priority still. On the St. Louis side, 209 expected ISO to left-handed hitters so far for Alcantara. Only a 14% strikeout percentage as well. 166 expected ISO to righties. Cardinals look like another middle-of-the-road stack for me. They're not getting much ownership. 5% ownership to Brendan Donovan is the most. 3% or less to everyone else. I have 7% Alec Burleson. He's only 4K. He does have power. He does have the platoon advantage against Alcantara. So far this season, 222 expected ISO with a 375 expected WOBA against right-handed pitching. Those are pretty big numbers for somebody that's 4K and sub 5% owned. So I do like that. I'm getting to 5% Donovan along with the rest of the field. And then I'm at 3% or less on everyone else. So I do think Burleson and Donovan look like the two most appealing bats here from St. Louis. Orioles are about to have the best trade deadline if they can get back some good pitching prospects to go along with Grayson Bradish coming back with their lineup is setting up great for next year. Yeah, like I don't want to get too derailed on the Orioles, but obviously I'm always happy to talk about them. I don't expect them to get like massive returns in most cases. O'Hearn and Eflin, if they get traded, they'll kind of have to get something good because if they have to get something more valuable than the 31st overall pick or whatever next year, or they won't trade them because they'll make both of those guys qualifying offers. But like they don't have necessarily outside of O'Hearn the best trade pieces, but they have so many of them. I had actually kind of made the case that like obviously it sucks the way this season has gone, and you would have preferred that they just be healthy and not play like shit to start the season. But it's kind of like a blessing in disguise because their minor league system had kind of gotten like stretched out from guys making it to the majors or getting traded. And then, so now they're kind of like top heavy with Mayo, Basayo. It doesn't, Kerstad's lost value. And they didn't really have like a lot of depth in the minors. They are absolutely going to be able to replenish that minor league system between all the draft picks they had this year and then just getting, at least high upside, like lottery type prospects. Like they got for Soto. They got, a 20-year-old reliever that throws 100 miles an hour from the Mets. Just getting guys like that then in the offseason they can turn around and trade for whatever, pitching they go after. So I do think it has the potential to like, you look back in 1 to 3 years, like later on in this window, and you're like, damn, they got this really, it was really useful that they made these trades. But obviously right now it sucks. Next, we have the Nats taking on Houston in Houston. About a 4.5 total for the Astros, 4 to 4.5 for the Nats, which for some reason are over here. Michael Soroka going for Washington, Jason Alexander for Houston, $6,800 price tag on Alexander, $7,600 on Soroka. Not getting to too much Alexander here. 3% ownership. I'm getting to 1%. He is cheap. The matchup against the Nats is okay. It's one of those weird matchups where the actual lineup is probably a little bit better than, or it's definitely better than like if you look at the active roster. Their active roster is 24th in WRC plus against right-handed pitching. They are only 26th in strikeout percentage, but then like the actual lineup, CJ Abrams is very good. James Wood is phenomenal. Luis Garcia is an above average hitter. Bell and Lowe are good. And then the bottom of the lineup drops off as you get into kind of like some young prospects that on real baseball teams probably wouldn't be in the majors yet, but the top is actually good. So Alexander, not a particularly good strikeout pitcher. Not really looking to get to him. I am interested in Soroka though. $7,600 price tag is pretty cheap. He's getting 13% ownership. I'm getting to 21%. He has struck out 25% of hitters so far this season in 78 innings pitched. Speaking of guys that, just are shit on the White Sox and then become major league players elsewhere. Like Soroka was a competent, he was a highly regarded young prospect for Atlanta, competent pitcher, had a ton of injuries. Then he goes to the White Sox where he is just not any good. They used him a little bit as a starter. He struck out 12% of hitters he faced, but he is striking guys out this year. He's still not super expensive. 4.05 xFIP. To put that in context, he has an identical xFIP to Lucas Giolito, who's 7,800, but also basically the same as Seth Lugo, who's 8,700. So I am interested in Soroka here. It's a middle of the road spot against the Astros, but you still don't have Jeremy Pena. So that does make their lineup, at least a little bit weaker. They rank 22nd in strikeout percentage against right-handed pitching this season, but they are also 22nd in WRC plus. So I am fine using Soroka as a middle of the road value or mid-range value play. I think he looks pretty good, all things considered. Washington bats here against Alexander. 6% ownership coming into Garcia, 4% coming into Bell and Abrams and Wood, less than that to everyone else. I'm pretty much the same. I have 6% Garcia, 5% Bell, 5% Abrams, 5% James Wood. That is clearly the part of the lineup that I would want to get to against Jason Alexander. They are the best hitters on this team. You get some stolen base upside as well. Limited sample in the major leagues for Alexander. Only 195 pitches thrown to lefties this year, 176 to righties, and he didn't pitch in the majors last year or the year before. 202 expected ISO in that limited sample to lefties, 156 to righties. If you go back to 2022, get a little bit larger sample size, 235 expected ISO to lefties, 111 to righties. So has had, again, small sample, but a pretty drastic split between left-handed power and right-handed power historically, which again would set up well for the top part of this Nats lineup. 178 expected ISO against right-handed pitching this year for Abrams, 263 for Wood, 197 for Garcia, 226 for Bell, 168 for Lowe. It does suck from a stacking standpoint that you can't play Lowe and Bell together, but any of those guys I think look pretty good, particularly Garcia, Abrams, and James Wood. On the Houston side against Soroka, I'm getting over the field on Soroka, but I am actually over the field on the Astros as well. Right-handed heavy lineup in Houston. You have the Crawford boxes in left field. If you can just pull some fly balls, you can hit some home runs. Soroka so far this season has struck out 24% of righties, 147 expected ISO. Again, I think he's a pretty solid pitcher, but you do also just have a really inexpensive Houston team. Taylor Trammell, 2,400, probably leading off, getting 8% ownership. He's in 15% of my lineups right now. Yainer Diaz projected for 2% ownership. I'm getting to 13%, $3,200 salary. He has power at catcher and he's cheap. Jacob Melton, $2,000, probably hitting somewhere in the middle of the order. 5% ownership. I'm at 12%. I have 12% Christian Walker at 6% owned, 7% Altuve, Caratini, 6% Matthews. So I'm over the field on Houston right now. Maybe the ownership does just come up and then, I end up getting a little bit less. I did have them already, though, projected to be at least a little bit higher owned than the industry in general does, and I accounted for that. But I don't think that they're a team that necessarily gets a ton of ownership on this slate because they're not anywhere close to one of the highest team totals. So like the value component certainly could drive ownership up a little bit. That is a spot where like usually if if industry ownership under projects guys because of Sims, it's the Sims just like hammering the best point per dollar values and driving them up a bit. And you do have some of that here with Trammell and Melton in particular, if they're at the top and in the middle of the order. But at the same time, on a 12-game slate, I don't think you're going to have the industry just saying like, oh yeah, let's go play 30% Taylor Trammell and let's go play 30% Jacob Melton. Like maybe those 5 to 8% ownership projections end up being like 8 to 11% or something. But I don't think you're going to get like drastic ownership coming into Houston. So I do like them as a value stack here. Again, I think Soroka is a good pitcher. I don't think he's like infallible or anything like that. He's not somebody that I'm like terrified to take bats against or anything. I'm actually just kind of perfectly fine being on both sides of this one. It's kind of the opposite of some of those other matchups where you had the expensive pitcher and the expensive offense facing each other. Here you have a pretty inexpensive Soroka, very inexpensive for a pitcher with his strikeout ability, facing a watered down Houston lineup that is just dirt cheap across the board. Like even Christian Walker's 3,500. The only hitter in the projected lineup that SaberSim had that I used above $3,700 is Altuve. Like this is a free Houston team. It's kind of difficult for there not to be either at least a couple good pieces from Houston or at least a serviceable start from Soroka given their salaries. So I do like being over the field on both sides there. Texas taking on the Angels after completely screwing me yesterday against Jack Kohanowitz. Tonight for the Angels, we have Yusei Kikuchi. For the Rangers, we have Patrick Corbin. I'm not getting to Corbin at 7,700. He has been fine this year. I've talked about him in the past that I kind of thought he was underrated in the past. Underrated is not the right word. I thought that his issues were kind of overstated in the past. Like, he was a really bad contract and a below average pitcher, but not like the worst pitcher ever or anything like that. He's actually been solid this year. 3.97 xFIP, 3.78 ERA, striking out 20% of hitters, which obviously isn't great, but it's not nothing. There are strikeouts to be had in the Angels lineup, but there is also a lot of right-handed power here. Corbin has struck righties out 19% of the time, has held them to a 168 expected ISO, which isn't bad. Like, it's not great, but it's not bad. But there is a lot of right-handed power upside here. I'm not getting to Corbin. I am getting to a lot of Kikuchi. $8,000, getting 28% ownership. I have 35%. Very good strikeout pitcher. We saw him really suck at the beginning of the year, but has worked the strikeout percentage back up to 24.5%. His stuff plus grade is still down from last year. His strikeout rate is still down. His command hasn't been quite as good, although it has still been above average. But at this point, you have an above average strikeout pitcher. You don't have great pitching on this slate. Of the pitchers that are on this slate, excluding Sean Manaea because he's barely pitched so far this year, and excluding Boyle because he hasn't made many starts yet. Of the pitchers that have, made a handful of starts at least, Glasnow, Luzardo, and Gray and Soroka are the only pitchers with a higher strikeout percentage than Kikuchi so far this season. Last year, he struck out 28% of hitters, which would put him ahead of Sonny Gray this year. So I never feel comfortable going to him because I just don't trust him at all. But he is a good strikeout pitcher. The Rangers have been a disappointing lineup overall this season. Their active roster against left-handed pitching since the start of last season ranks 24th in WRC+. They also rank, where are they? Oh, first. Was not looking that high. They rank first in strikeout percentage against left-handed pitching since last season. So that obviously sets up pretty nicely. You got Jock Peterson back. I assume he probably won't be in the lineup today. If he is, probably free strikeouts for Kikuchi. That dude looks like he did nothing but eat the entire time he was on the injured list. Had a lot of him yesterday. Watched one of his at-bats. Was like, holy shit, this guy is like pushing Daniel Vogelbach in size. But probably won't be in the lineup today. But the Rangers are kind of like, as far as taking pitchers against them, it always feels kind of similar to like when you take pitchers against the Braves, because you look at the lineup and it's like, all right, you have Semien, you have Seager, you have Garcia, you have Young, you have Langford. Like, this is not a bad lineup probably going forward, even though it's been underwhelming so far this season. But at the same time, there are strikeouts in there. Kikuchi is a good strikeout pitcher. And you don't have great pitching on this slate, and he's only 8K. So happy to get to some Kikuchi. Certainly would not be upset if I find out that I'm getting to some Rangers in a second. And I'm getting to them, but not as much as I kind of thought maybe I would be. The field's not getting to too much of Texas. 8% Corey Seager, 6% Semien, 6% Langford and Young, 5% Haggerty, Garcia. I'm over on some of these guys. I have 10% Garcia, Semien, Seager, 7% Langford, 5 to 6% on Higashioka, Young, and Haggerty. So I'm a little over the field in the aggregate on the Rangers. You have power bats here in a good home run park against Kikuchi. Kikuchi has allowed a 210 expected ISO to righties this year. He has only struck out 22.8% of righties compared to 29% of lefties. You are going to get a predominantly right-handed lineup, probably going to have 8 righties plus Corey Seager. So it is not a safe spot for Kikuchi. Again, I like him as a DFS play in the context of this slate, but it is not a safe spot. I do think that getting to some of these Rangers bats makes sense, especially right-handed power bats like Garcia, like Semien. Going back to the start of last season, Semien 182 expected ISO against left-handed pitching. Garcia only at 164. Young at 215. He has struggled this year, got demoted. Now he's back. 234 for Wyatt Langford. And reminder that Corey Seager hits left-handed pitching really well. Kikuchi's been pretty much lights out against lefties, but Seager has a 261 expected ISO against them since the start of last season. So certainly not shying away from Corey Seager here either. On the Angels side against Corbin, 8% ownership coming into Zach Neto is the highest at 4,900, followed by Trout and Adele at 6% apiece, 5% to Ward and Rengifo. Middle of the road stack for the field, pretty similar for me. I have 8% Joe Adele, 7% Zach Neto, 5% DR no, and it goes down from there. Obviously, wouldn't be mad about getting to some more $4,700 Trout. But like I said, Corbin's been, he's been fine this year. The Angels do have flawed hitters, but they do have a lot of power upside in that lineup. Wouldn't talk anyone off of getting to more of these right-handed power bats against Corbin. Since last year, 251 expected ISO against left-handed pitching for Neto, 161 for Trout, but he's barely played. If you go back to only 79 plate appearances since last year for Trout against lefties, go back to 2022, you get the 307 plate appearances, 239 expected ISO. Taylor Ward, 246 expected ISO since last year. Adele, 299. Ohapi, 258. I honestly wish I had more of the Angels here, but it is what it is. Again, there's a million offenses on the slate, but I do like the Angels' power upside here. This is certainly a spot where, again, I'm not going to like manually go in and change stuff because I trust my process and I haven't disliked any of the teams I am getting to, but I would prefer if, at 7:00 I enter my lineups and I actually have the Angels. I like the spot. Like, I like the upside. I'm not saying I like the spot and that like I think Corbin is terrible or anything, but I like the power upside spot against the pitcher that doesn't get a lot of strikeouts. You have a team that swings and misses a lot, but also hits the ball really hard in a park that's good for home runs. I certainly am interested in the Angels from a matchup standpoint. Mets taking on the Padres in San Diego. Sean Manaea going for the Mets. Ryan Bergert going for the Padres. Not getting to Bergert. He's getting like 2% ownership. He's 7K. Tough matchup against the Mets. Not one that I am really looking to target. Sorry, is it Darvish? Okay. I'm seeing Ryan Bergert everywhere else. Let me refresh this. Okay, so our data provider still has Darvish for whatever reason. Trying to double check. Yeah, it looks like it's Bergert. I'm not looking to get to him. I wouldn't really be looking to get to Darvish either. On the other side, though, Manaea, good strikeout pitcher, limited sample so far this season, coming back from injury. Tough matchup against the Padres. Tough strikeout matchup. Good, pretty good hitters in general. But at 9K, 7% ownership projected to Manaea. I'm getting to 12%. I don't mind using him as a low-owned, relatively high upside guy in lineups where I do need to save ownership at pitcher. I don't have a lot of confidence in him, obviously. This Padres active roster against left-handed pitching has the lowest strikeout percentage since last season. They have been below average in terms of WRC+. If you can navigate your way through, Machado, Tatis, Bogarts, like it helps that Merrill is left-handed, Sheets is left-handed. You're not super concerned about Iglesias, Cronenworth, Maldonado is absolute garbage. Like, if you can kind of just navigate your way through that top part, it's still a tough strikeout matchup because Arise, Machado, Merrill, Tatis, Bogarts, and this year's Sheets are all below average K guys. But from a production standpoint, it's not the best lineup in the world. So I think Manaea is, a pretty interesting piece from a contrarian standpoint. He's not somebody that I want like my entire night revolving around or anything like that. But he does have good strikeout upside. Jay Main said Darvish switch back tomorrow. So yeah, I guess that's what it is lineup provider just hasn't updated that. Jenna said, if you could only choose one of Soroka or Kikuchi in single entry, which do you prefer? Probably Kikuchi. I think he projects higher. If I couldn't find the salary, Soroka's, I think, $400 less. If I couldn't find the salary, I wouldn't like blow up my lineup to get to Kikuchi, but I would, assuming that like I have some semblance of contrarian hitters somewhere in my somewhere in my lineup, and I just have $8,000 available, I would go Kikuchi. He projects a little bit better, but I think they're comparable range of outcomes and similar projections. So again, like if you have a stack you really like, you have the SP1 you like, and you have $7,800 left, I wouldn't go out of my way to force it or anything. For the offenses here, starting on the Mets side, I have 8% Soto, 7% Nimmo, 5% Alonso, 4% on Lindor and Alvarez. Pretty similar to the field. The highest owned Mets are 4 to 5% Lindor, Nimmo, and Soto. So slightly above the field there. Again, these are projections against Darvish, so they probably maybe come up once it switches over to Ryan Bergert. I'm not actually sure if he's worse than this version of Darvish. Limited sample for him so far in the majors, so nothing to, not much to really read into. Darvish obviously hasn't been very good this year, so I think a pretty decent chance that projections go up at least a little bit on the Mets between now and lock once we get the right pitcher in there. But either way, I think they're going to look pretty similar, where they're mostly a middle of the road stack. They obviously have a lot of talent. They are relatively expensive. You're obviously going to be happy about getting to whatever Lindor, Nimmo, Soto, Alonso you can get to, but they're also expensive. They're hard to, all fit into the same lineup. San Diego on the other side against Manaea. No real ownership coming in. 2% to Machado is the most. I have 3% Machado, 2% Tatis. That's about it. Just not a team that I really want to target here against a pretty good pitcher in Manaea on a slate where there are plenty of good offenses to get to. Pittsburgh facing San Francisco. In San Francisco, Justin Verlander going for the Giants, Bailey Falter for the Pirates. We have a Justin Verlander chalk slate, which I don't think I have said a single time this season. 18% projected ownership coming into Verlander at 7,200. I have 18% Verlander. The matchup against the Pirates is a solid one. Active roster ranks 28th in WRC plus against right-handed pitching. The only teams that have been worse are the White Sox and the Rockies. The Pirates also rank 7th, tied for 6th in strikeout percentage. So good strikeout matchup for Verlander, a team that doesn't hit very well. The problem is that Justin Verlander doesn't pitch very well. 18.6% strikeout percentage this season, 18.7 last season. His stuff is still grading out well. 105.5 stuff plus grade. It was 106 last year. Command hasn't been good at all, though. 91 location plus grade this year. It was 89 last season. And we're at 84 innings pitched this year, plus whatever he threw last year. He just looks like a sub 20% K guy now, even though the stuff would have you think that he's a little bit better. But it is a great park for pitching. It is a good matchup. You can't guarantee anything with Justin Verlander these days, obviously, but it's about as good a spot as you're going to get. It's not the Rockies, but it's pretty damn close. So I think Verlander here at 7,200 is fine. I'm right in line with the field. I don't have any confidence in his ability to pitch, but I completely understand why he would be pretty popular here at 7,200. For the offenses on the Pirates side, as tempting as it is to stack against a 15 to 20% owned Justin Verlander, I'm still not doing much of it on a 12-gamer in this park, maybe on the night slate. O'Neal Cruz is in 2% of my lineups. That's the most I have of anybody on the Pirates. If you did want to go that route, so far this season, Verlander allowing a 163 expected ISO to lefties, 186 to righties. So not tons of power to either side of the plate, but he has given up a bit more to righties. Looking at the best power bats for Pittsburgh this season, 183 expected ISO against right-handed pitching for McCutchen, 170 for Reynolds, 268 for Cruz. Like, Cruz is obviously the best option from the Pirates, all things considered. Gives you stolen base upside, gives you massive power upside, but the park does downplay it, and he's an outfielder. There's plenty of good outfielders. On the Giant side, getting to a bit more of them against Falter, which I don't think has worked for me once in the history of DFS, but going to try it again. There is some ownership coming into the Giants as well. 9% coming into Matt Chapman. He is only 3,900. This Giants team is priced at a point where you can't just completely ignore that they're playing in San Francisco, because you still need home run upside to win tournaments. So you can't just completely ignore it, but at the very least, it does make them priced favorably from a median standpoint, because they are priced for the fact that they play their home games in this park. $3,900 Chapman, $3,800 Ramos, $4,500 Devers, 9% ownership to Chapman, 7 to Ramos, 6 to Devers. I have 12 Chapman, 7 Ramos, 7 Devers. I'm also getting to 8% Willy Adames. He's only projected for about 3% ownership at 4,300. I do think that is a pretty high upside, low owned option here against Falter. So far this season, Falter is somebody that can be frustrating to stack against when he's locating. He gets a lot of infield fly balls and kind of weak contact, but very, very small margin for error for him. 206 expected ISO against right-handed hitters this year, only a 16% strikeout percentage in that split. Going back to the start of last season, 294 expected ISO against lefties for Ramos, 175 for Adames, 177 for Chapman. So there is some power upside there, particularly for Ramos, but then cheap pricing as well. Devers, 168 expected ISO against lefties. Obviously, you prefer him against righties, but it is still Rafael Devers at 4,500. So I'm getting to primarily Chapman, Ramos, Devers, and Adames from the San Francisco side. And then finally wrapping things up here with Seattle and the Athletics. In Sacramento, Luis Severino going for the A's and Logan Evans for the Mariners. Neither pitcher has any ownership. I'm not getting to either one. 2% coming into Severino, 1% coming into Evans. Severino's cheap at 6,300. That's the only thing I can say about Severino that is positive. Actually, the other thing I will say that is positive, and I'm not saying this to suggest that you should play Severino tonight. Like I said, I don't have him. I do think his home road splits are massively overblown, and that's probably going to continue because he happened to be really good in his last start on the road. From a strikeout standpoint, at least going into that last start, his strikeout percentage was very similar. The biggest difference you'll find in his home road numbers are that the batting average on balls in play at home is like astronomically higher than on the road. And I think people kind of just are buying into this home road narrative because one, like his home park does suck to pitch in, but he said he doesn't like pitching there. And then, so he says, I don't like pitching here. And then you look and his surface level numbers are much worse at home. And people just immediately say, oh yeah, well, he can't pitch in the stadium. I don't buy into that. That being said, I'm not playing him tonight against Seattle. For the Mariners bats, it is a nice park upgrade for them. They are going to be pretty popular, relative to the slate, but still not crazy ownership. I am a little bit below the field, though. 14% ownership projected to Cal Raleigh, 11% to Rodriguez, 10% to Naylor. All of those guys obviously look fine. 8% to Crawford, 7% to Polanco and Arozarena. I'm not getting to as much as the field. I have 9% Rodriguez, 7% Polanco, 6% Crawford, 5% Naylor, 4% Raleigh. Just happens to be a popular team that I'm not getting to right now. But clearly, if you have low-owned secondary stacks, you have low-owned pitching, whatever, you can play the Mariners here. Like, it is a good spot in this stadium against Severino. They have a lot of power upside. It's a huge park upgrade. I understand why the Mariners are popular. It's kind of just, it's a 12-game slate. I'll take my chances on some other offenses. On the A's side against Evans, 7% projected ownership to Butler and Langoliers, 10% to Kurtz. I have 13% Butler, 8% Kurtz, 4% Rooker, and it goes down from there. So mostly I'm just under on the hitters in this game, which doesn't make me feel good. I felt really good about being over on them yesterday until the game happened, but it never is going to feel good to be under on hitters in this game. It's a good park for home runs. Neither of these pitchers are great, but there are plenty of good offensive spots. I've been happy with the ones that I'm getting to for the most part. So far this season, 199 expected ISO allowed to lefties for Evans, 200 to righties. So he's allowed power to both sides of the plate. 138 expected ISO to righties for Severino, 167 to lefties. He has shown good stuff this season. It hasn't been reflected in his strikeout percentage. He's only striking out 16% of hitters, but his stuff plus grade this year is nearly 108. His stuff plus grade this season is higher than every single pitcher that is pitching today, or at least, that has made at least 5 starts and is starting today, with the exception of Max Fried. So I guess that would be your argument if you really wanted to play Severino, is the guy with the second best stuff on the slate is $6,300. But, that being said, it's a tough park to pitch in, obviously. The Mariners are a good offense. They have a lot of power. So Severino, I think, is a better pitcher than Evans, at least in terms of limiting power, but it's a pretty good spot for both of these offenses. I just happen to be below the field on both. Now going to recap what I'm getting to if the slate started right now. Highest projected players will be on the screen, and I'll go through my highest owned players. Right now at pitcher, Glasnow, Kikuchi, Luzardo, my top 3, followed by Soroka and Verlander. Pretty chalky on the pitching for the most part. Highest owned catchers for me, again, the highest projected, are on the screen. Highest owned for me, and keep in mind, most lineups weren't in when I ran this, but Will Smith, Yainer Diaz, JT Realmuto. At first base, getting to Christian Walker, Bryce Harper, and Andrew Vaughn. Nick Kurtz right behind him. Second base, Marcus Semien, Cody Clemens, and Jorge Polanco. Third base, Matt Chapman, Tommy Edman, Austin Riley, and Alex Bregman. Shortstop, Mookie Betts, Bobby Witt Jr., Trevor Story, Corey Seager. Outfield, Kyle Schwarber, Taylor Trammell, Lawrence Butler, Jacob Melton, Adolis Garcia, Teoscar Hernandez, Jarren Duran, my highest owned outfielders. Highest owned stacks overall for me: Dodgers, Astros, Phillies, Rangers, Red Sox. Highest owned 5-mans: Red Sox, Rangers, Phillies, Dodgers, Astros. home run pick, I will once again go back to Kyle Schwarber. Didn't get it done for me yesterday. I think he walked like 9 times, but going to go back for him again today. And that's it. That's all I have for you. Good luck on your lineups tonight. Thanks for checking out the show. Don't forget to hit the thumbs up button. Actually, totally forgot during the show. If you are sticking around, I'll hit on it quickly. Otherwise, I will get to it tomorrow. But we do have NFL packages live now. Pulling that up on the screen. Maybe. A lot of different packages, offering a lot of different stuff here. This is the first full product that we've put together as the endgame team since we acquired Run the Sims. Obviously, we have our MLB projections, but we don't have an MLB sim. We have our golf sim, but we outsource the projections. Not the case for NFL, if I could figure out where stuff is on our page. I think I need to just scroll down. There we go. A lot of different options for whatever you need. We have the Sim Runner Pro, which includes Optimizer, projections from Uticow, and also over at Endgame, Optimizer, the Sim, prop tools for Underdog, Prize Picks, and the Prop Sniper that has already been at Run the Sims if you're familiar with it. You can simulate up to 50,000 showdown lineups at a time, up to 10,000 classic lineups at a time, and then also comes with Shady's Portfolio Optimizer. That is, we partnered with Shady Advice. He brought or is bringing his portfolio diversification optimizer, whatever you want to call it, that he uses for DFS, pairing that with our sim product so you can manage your entries. You can manage your MME if that's something that you do. You can use that to do it. So we have that. If you don't need that, you have a separate option, weekly, monthly, annual for everything other than that optimizer. We also have a separate $25 a month if you don't want the full Sims package. You know, if you're somebody who just plays single entry, 3max, whatever, only $25 a month. You still get the projections, you get the optimizer, you can sim up to 5 lineups at a time, you get the props tool, you just don't get the full 50,000 and 10,000 lineup sim. So we have that if that, you know, makes more sense for what you play. If you only want the prop stuff, we have that as well. So again, I'll get into all of that, you know, a little bit more on tomorrow's show, but wanted to make sure I at least mentioned it here. And use the promo code EARLYBIRD. Gets you 15% off whatever NFL package you want. Sign up using the link in the description below. Now I'm heading out. Thanks again. Good luck on your lineups tonight. Thanks for watching the show. Hit the thumbs up button, all that stuff. See you back here tomorrow.